Hey, thanks for tuning in. In this video, I'm going to talk about the warning of the spies. As the Israelites neared the land of Canaan, Elohim commanded them to send forth spies to explore the land. The majority of the spies brought back a warning. And there is another warning that I think we can gather from this story, a warning that applies to us today. So as the Israelites approached the land of Canaan, they were commanded to appoint a leader from each of the tribes, except for the tribe of Levi, that was to explore the land. And after they explored the land, they brought back a report of the land. They also brought back the produce of the land. And the people agreed that the land was a very good land. It was a very fruitful land. But the majority of them said it was a very dangerous land, that it was dangerous for them to go forth and enter. And of course, the idea was that they were going to invade and conquer this land. They were a bunch of people living out in the wilderness in tents. And here was this land that, even though the land was very good, it was also very well defended, that the people were very strong, and that they were much to be feared. On the other hand, Caleb said, "Let us enter in and take this good land." But the rest of the spies, except for Joshua, apparently disagreed, and they persuaded the people that instead they should just go back the way they came, that they wished that they were dead, and well, let's make the best of this situation, let's just go back into slavery. And so they proposed appointing a leader to lead them back the way they came. And Caleb tried to persuade them otherwise, but then they suggested stoning him and just going their way. Of course, Elohim did not like this. As we know, the people were punished as a result. That all of the people from 20 years of age and older, except for Caleb and Joshua, they were not going to be allowed to enter the land. And after the people heard this, they realized what they had done. They realized that, well, maybe we weren't thinking straight before. Now we see how it is. Let's go ahead and get together and enter the land like we were supposed to begin with. Of course, this was said that it wasn't going to prevail, that Elohim was not with them now, that they had already made their decision, and Elohim had made his decision as a result. And the people didn't listen, and they tried to enter in, and they were driven back. So in thinking back over that situation, since we are not in that situation, since we're out of it, there might be one of two ways we could think about it. On the one hand, we might think, here the Israelites go again. Here they're doing something that's just ridiculous, and they should have just known that Elohim was with them. They should have been mindful of all of the signs and wonders, and been mindful of the fact that Elohim had continued to deliver them from danger. And we might think of our idealized self, that imagined idealized self that we have that possesses all of these idealized traits that we can imagine. And we might think that that idealized self would have done exactly what Caleb did in that situation, even despite everyone else doing otherwise, that our ideal self would have done exactly the way Caleb did. On the other hand, I think there's something else we could learn from this. There's another way that we could consider this. The fact is that not everyone always thinks in the same way. We do not always think the same way depending on the situation. And the fact is that out in the wilderness, they were continually experiencing danger. Of course, Elohim was delivering them out of it, but the fact was that they repeatedly faced death. They repeatedly faced the risk of it. One of the first things that took place in the coming out into the wilderness was that Pharaoh's army was pursuing after them. And so there was that very real danger that was right before their face, or at least it seemed to be. Of course, Elohim saved them from that, just as he saved them from the Amalekites whenever they fought them in the wilderness soon after that. But there was this constant threat, this constant danger. And they experienced the threat of death through dehydration. that their flocks were going to die because there was no water, and that they were going to die. They and their families were going to die from a lack of water. And we might look at it and wonder, are they just exaggerating what was really going on? But the answer was that they were provided with water. So it seems like it probably was a real threat. Of course, Elohim was with them and was delivering them from it. But in those situations, when that death seems imminent, when that danger is right before one's face, it can be easy to get into a different state of mind. It can be easy to not be 100% reasonable. Perceiving that danger might put one into a state of desperation. And we might think to some things that we've witnessed in our lives and recognize that it doesn't even take the fear of death to bring that about. So one example I might describe is a friend of mine that his fiancée left him. And we've probably all seen some situation like this, where all of a sudden a relationship has deteriorated and ended, and it seems like to that person their life is just crashing down around them, that everything is ruined. And in those situations, the person does not always think the way they would have thought otherwise. So in this situation, the person proposed entering into the military because it seemed like everything had just fallen apart. And I don't think they would have considered that otherwise. Of course, after coming to us, coming to fellow friends, eventually they were kind of pulled out of that state. They were able to realize that, oh, okay, maybe I'm not thinking 100% straight. Maybe things aren't quite as bad as I'm imagining them to be, even though it wasn't actually they had been pulled fully out of it. It was just in part. And so I think that all of us have probably seen some situation like that, where something seems to be going wrong, something unexpected comes up, and then we're not thinking straight. We're not thinking exactly the same way we would have completely outside that situation. And after the situation is over, after we've been pulled out of that state of mind, we might think, okay, now I see the reasonable way to look at that. Now I realize that, yeah, I wasn't thinking entirely right, and that the reasonable way to approach this is some other way. What might that resemble in the Israelite story, wherein the spies came back? The spies gave their warning and their report, and the Israelites became very distraught. They probably already were on the edge of that, and refused to enter. After Elohim told them that they were going to be punished, they came out of that and were, oh, I guess maybe we'll enter now. I guess now I realize what we should have done to begin with, but it was too late at that point. They had already made their decision. So we don't always think the same way in the situation that our idealized 100% reasonable self would if we were just outside of the situation. And I think if we don't have the humility to recognize that we can get ourselves into a lot of danger. Now, just recognizing that we don't always think the same way isn't going to resolve it. But say we go into some situation like that. Say something seems to be falling apart. Say there is that danger there. Knowing that, am I thinking straight? Am I really approaching this reasonably? Knowing that our state of mind is going to influence us can at least help. Maybe it has the opportunity to allow us to think twice about what we're doing, to think twice about how we're approaching it. We wouldn't even have that option if we thought we were always 100% reasonable, which in my personal experience, I know the way I think about things can change depending on the situation, and not always for a good way. So I think there is this warning in this story, a warning that we can learn from it if we're willing to. Because things are not always going to be easy, and we're not always going to make the right decisions or be inclined to make the right decisions. We can focus on how an idealized self might proceed. We can focus on what Caleb did in that situation. But we have to be mindful of the people. And it also wasn't just that we're making a decision just independent, that we're sitting down and thinking, okay, what are the circumstances? What's the logic surrounding this? And okay, I'm going to make some independent decision. All of the people around them, all of the people except for Caleb and Joshua and Moses and Aaron, presumably, were saying, we're not going to enter. This is horrible. Let's go back the way we came. So there is that added influence. The majority of the spies were saying, let's not enter. The majority of the people were saying, let's not enter. So being mindful that we're not always going to do exactly what we want to, and no one else is either, I think is the warning that we should take from this. That we need to be mindful of that we need to be careful and guard ourselves. Just as Deuteronomy says repeatedly, to be guarding, because there may be that danger at some point. So we need to strengthen ourselves and be aware of that, and take care that we are mindful of what we are thinking, mindful of how we are proceeding, and mindful of what we should be keeping on our heart.